Hello, everyone. It's Andy. Welcome to Stackin It Up, a series of tech transformation talks that focus on the people, technology, and stories behind real-world digital transformation. Today, we have on Bryan McClellan, who's a senior DevOps and infrastructure engineer here at Mark III. Hey, Bryan, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. Thanks for coming back.
Absolutely.
So would you mind telling the viewers a little bit about your background and what kinds of things you do here?
Yeah, so I guess I've been in information technology going on almost 2 decades. I hate to say that, but yeah,
Wow.
sure enough. What I do at Mark III Systems, well, a little bit of everything. What I like to spend my time working on, is probably around automation, Kubernetes, containers, digital transformation kind of stuff. That's where I like to say, emerging technologies, perhaps.
Awesome. But you still do definitely touch a lot on infrastructure and, foundational elements as well, right?
Oh yeah, infrastructure is my wheelhouse. That's my background. That's what I eat, sleep, and breathe.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Awesome. You got to have a little bit of everything, I think, to make it all work together for sure. Speaking of which, the topic of today is all about the topic of source code management for system administrators. This is sort of assumed for developers, but it's very much, I think, a hit or miss concept for a lot of folks in IT operations, especially as folks start getting more and more into automation initiatives. Can you tell the audience a little bit about how you got started down this path as a systems architect yourself?
Yeah, sure. So coding, although I have an infrastructure background, the coding portion, scripting, coding, has always been something that I've put a lot of focus on. I think that it's a great skill set to have. It can kind of put you out above the rest and in a room full of administrators, getting things done quickly, automating things. So coding and writing scripts I've done for quite some time. What I haven't done until probably a couple of years ago is work in a source control management strategy into my coding. So really, what I started with was Team Foundation Server from Microsoft, which currently is the Azure DevOps, I think they call it now, and just checking in and out code there to begin with. That's kind of where I started and cut my teeth in source control management. So
Awesome. I think you've seen the good and the bad of leveraging source code management and not leveraging source code management. Can you tell us a little bit about what can happen to some organizations sometimes if they make it further down the path of automation or just leveraging code and scripting in general, and they don't have a good source code management strategy in place?
yeah, so this topic is actually one of my favorite to talk about because I'm very much into the operations piece. So what I see a lot of time is, it's the standard way of doing things, unfortunately, in a lot of places, and that is, the administrators, the engineers, they'll create these little scripts, or they'll get these scripts from the internet, and they'll put them together and save them in maybe their home directory. They'll give them a name, and they'll run them either ad hoc, or perhaps it's a solution that they run into a scheduled task, or even more, they distribute it out to other staff. So essentially this becomes a file in your home directory or somewhere on the network where you have some source code, and you either run it from that location or you move it to another location to run. And what occurs there is the first thing is there's a disconnection from the source where you're going to be doing the development and the distributed code. So there's no really link back to that initially. That's kind of one challenge, right? Is making sure that the code you're running in production is the most up-to-date code. Another challenge, and probably I think these are all super important, is whenever a change is made to that code, it's not necessarily tracked in a way that can be reverted, or there's not really a detailed history in this type of this process. usually what occurs is I see what happens is people will get these scripts, they'll be on their network folder. If a code change needs to be made, they'll take that and they'll take that file, they'll copy it, maybe add a date or put a .bkp on the back of it, and then they start to edit again. And then what happens is, as you can imagine, you've got multiple iterations of this code without a direct family link between each other. So the bottom line is, right, making sure that your code, right, is linked back to the source, right, so that you're running the most up-to-date code, and then making sure that you've got a change management process attached to your code, right? Without that, what you end up doing is taking this code, which is, a script. When people say scripts, they like to say script like it's a little thing, but really, it could be a major dependency in your infrastructure. So, imagine if you take this code and you put it on a scheduled task server, and I think there's a term out there. People say infrastructure is code, and this really isn't it. But what this is your infrastructure becomes dependent on this code. And just like any infrastructure application, you want to tie a change control management process onto any changes that occur there, because without that, things start to fall apart. Troubleshooting is difficult. People aren't aware of changes, and so on and so forth. So a lot of bad things, I guess you could say, can come from not having a good handle on managing code. And these are scripts we're talking about a lot of times, but they're very important scripts when it comes to running infrastructure.
Absolutely, it makes a ton of sense. So as far as like some of the tooling and some of those approaches that you might recommend, I think you talked a little bit about strategy. What about actual tooling and technologies that you recommend organizations look at?
Yeah, sure. So I personally use VS Code from Microsoft. It's an open source tool. It's pretty popular out there on the interweb, so I'm sure you can locate it. It's got a great amount of extensions and plugins. So one of the major ones is a source control management plugin. So whether you're it integrates directly with Git, and so I guess you could say VS Code, right, is the IDE of my choice. Git is what I use for the CLI, so the commands. And I use a GitHub and Azure DevOps. I use both of them in different ways. But I think that a good IDE and a place to store your code, whether that's GitHub, Azure DevOps, or Bitbucket, I think are the most popular ones. Getting an account there and starting to get your code in some repositories. So super important.
Awesome. Yeah, no, absolutely. You got to have the strategy, you got to have the tooling in place. So some of our viewers out there, I'm sure, are expert system administrators, but many of them are getting started as far as on their DevOps and on their coding journey. You were there at one point. Can you talk to the viewers out there a little bit about what you recommend for somebody just starting out? What approaches, what kind of resources perhaps to look at?
Sure. So I think the easiest way to adopt this process is to take that folder that the admins or the engineers or whomever has been keeping their scripts in, and just put that right into an SCM or a source configuration management products, a repository. So that immediately allows you to start tracking all of the code you have in that folder as a repository. I tend to refer to it as Scratch. The technique is fairly straightforward once you get the terminology in place and you get some of these commands. I have articles on my blog, theopscorner.com, where I get into some details on how I leverage Scratch and VS Code, and a few pointers on source control management as far as protecting your code in the SCM as well. So
Awesome. Good stuff. So again, Bryan's blog is theopscorner.com. Lots of good information there, not only on source code management, for administrators, but on a multitude of other topics as well, ranging from infrastructure to DevOps to coding, et cetera, et cetera. Bryan, thanks for joining us today. Before we sign off, can you let the viewers know how they can reach you directly if they have questions?
Sure. So you can reach me directly at my email address. That's BRYAN, Bryan, at markiiisys.com. And you can also reach out to me via my blog, theopscorner.com. There's about the author link. You can click on that. It's got a bunch of ways to get into contact with me. So.
All right, man. Thanks again. And thanks everyone for joining us. See you next time.